I'm gonna ask you, this is me asking you, to join me on a really dumb adventure here. And I'm pretty sure it will change the way you read. It may change your life. And if it does neither of those, you can like bully me and like in the comments, right? Okay, cool. The idea is this. I sat down and I read every single book that I own. Well, I got rid of first like 90% of them because I didn't want to read every single book that I own. And then of the remaining ones, I just read the first page, but close enough, right? I'm gonna take you through that same process in this video about how that works, like why it worked for me and like why I think it might be one of the most important things I've done to like really instantiate a reading habit for myself. This isn't about building a habit of reading like a book a day or like 300 books a year or anything like that. This is more like building a sustainable habit, something that you're actually going to be able to stick with. Something that like if you forget to do it, like brushing your teeth or taking a shower or needlessly arguing with people on the internet, like there's going to be some like internal voice that speaks out to you and is like, hey, there's still something left to do today. It's very easy to read when things are just kind of put in front of us, like by algorithm or curator or feed. That's like a kind of reading that we do and that we're really good at doing. The kind of reading that I'm going to encourage you to do and the habit that we're going to build in this video is completely self-directed. It's following our own whims, our own interests, and it's going to be with physical books. If you're like an ebook reader, like that is like single purpose, like an iPad is okay, a Kindle or something like that is much better. That's the kind of thing we're going to be doing. And we're going to be reading fiction. We're going to be reading things that aren't necessarily written with any primary purpose in them other than to transport us into different places. I find that we often buy books and think that we've acquired the knowledge inside of them, but it's the process of reading itself, like the time and energy that we put into reading, that is actually going to provide a lot of the value. By thinking that we've read something that we haven't actually read yet, we're like actually robbing ourselves of a lot of the true value of reading. I had a lot of books, and you know, there's value in being confronted with like all of the books you haven't read yet and that you will never be able to read. I think that's a humbling process. There's also value in having a reference library. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not saying get rid of books just for the sake of getting rid of them or that like you need to always read every book you have. But with like physical belongings, if you find that you just have like piles of books and they're not like properly organized and like you don't like how they are like aesthetically contributing to your life, it is okay. And I encourage you to get rid of them. Other people will make use of them. And you can always like download the ones that you're getting rid of as like PDFs or EPUBs as part of a digital library. If you know, you know, you actually get like a lot more use out of reference books that way, I think, because they become searchable and taggable. I probably won't get to read most of the books that I have remaining. And that's kind of the point. Books that are singular and that could have changed your life if only you read them. Like, I know that no matter how often or how much I read, that's going to happen. And I don't think of that process as passive or as like akin to extracting knowledge from a text. And with them being thinking machines, I think the implication is we should be careful and intentional about the kinds of thinking that we let into our lives. I think that any book you pick up will have lessons for you. Like if you're a writer and you're picking up a book that's just like really bad and it's like the worst written prose you've ever read, I think there's so much value in that because like your first impulse should be like, if this can get published, I know that I can publish something. Similarly, like if it's like a really great, beautiful, singular text that's like making you weep with the glimpses of beauty and like interconnectedness and like elaborate design and unfolding of the story, like if you're reading proofs and just finding yourself like having to close the book every 3 pages because it's too much, I think that's actually like one, you can definitely be jealous and furious that such a beautiful thing exists and use that to power like your own like motivation and to see if you can get close to it. But also like as a thinking machine, I think what that reveals is that like whatever glimpses of genius and beauty that you're able to see within the text, that's actually you. That's actually something that you're creating. That's happening entirely within your own mind. So I think that if you can like observe that and see that and make that happen in your head, if you're an artist, you can also reproduce that and make that yourself. Well, let's get into the fun part now, which is the approach of reading that we're actually going to use, how we're going to build this habit, and getting all of our books together and reading all of them. We know from research that self-discipline is a way better predictor and indicator for success, both like in life at grades, than things like IQ and other measures of intelligence. What we want to like figure out is how to cultivate self-discipline with a habit of reading. I'm going to take you through like a very abbreviated guide on how I build habits. Like getting much more in depth than this is like kind of out of scope for this video, but I will cover more in a future video. Our brains are lazy in the best way possible, I think. If we do something a lot, we tend to chunk it together into a single automatic routine. This is what really lets us like drive to work almost unconsciously, or what allows a gymnast to perform like a really complicated sequence. You can think of habits as being made up of three key parts. There's a cue, which is the trigger that will tell your brain to go into automatic mode and which habit you should be using. There's the routine, which is like the sequence itself, physical or emotional. This is like the part we usually associate with the habit. And then there's the reward. The reward is what really helps your brain figure out if this particular like habit loop is worth remembering in the future. Once the loop is engaged, like executive function is diminished, our brains like turn off in a lot of ways. And the amount of willpower that we need at this point to change the habit or to not engage the whole loop is really high. This makes habits like really hard to fend off unless we can apply willpower right at the cue, or unless we're able to switch out the routine of the habit completely. So that's what we're gonna do. For reading, our cue is gonna be getting into bed. We're gonna need this to be like as easy as possible. So we want like a light next to the bed. Like it can be a clamp light, you can have an e-reader that hopefully can only read books. iPads are great, but there's like too much other stuff that can go wrong, right, when we're trying to build a habit. So like really try to keep it simple. Our routine is gonna be for reading for 20 minutes a day. The golden rule of habit change is that if we keep the cue and the reward the same, that we can just kind of slot in a new routine to take place of the old routine. So for most of us, we're gonna be replacing time on our phone before bed. Using my phone before bed was largely a social activity for me. It was a way to like make plans with people, to like see what my friends were up to like text and just like feel kind of immersed in the social world a little bit before sleeping. What I found helpful was just talking to friends about the book that I'm reading. The function of that is like now when I read before bed, it is like in some ways a social activity. It is the thing that's gonna enable a social behavior in the future. You can experiment with like different cues, different rewards. Even the routine, you can try tweaking a little bit. I find it like really helpful to keep a chart of how many days in a row that I've kept a habit. Habits tend to become much more durable over time as they're repeated. But they do more than just become durable. You make yourself accessible to a certain way of thinking, and then that way just comes more easily and naturally overnight. I find that like my dreams are like a lot more creative and weird. And that like in the morning, I often have like pretty deep insights that were delivered to me unconsciously while I was sleeping. You may be familiar, like both Benjamin Franklin, Ernest Hemingway, like many writers and great thinkers, kind of a similar habit and like daily routine that they all had was like finishing their day on either unfinished work or on a great question. I think reading before bed serves something similar. It cues our unconsciousness to continue working on something while we sleep. It cues us in the morning to pick up kind of where we left off. So like rather than focusing a lot on like morning routines at first, where like willpower is really hard to muster because like you're half asleep, I think it's actually a lot more beneficial to focus on the evening routine where you still have like a little bit of willpower to spend. I think it's important to visualize and like really sit with what it would feel like if this habit was successful for you. Like really imagine like a year from now, 2 years, 5 years from now, what your life would be like if every day before bed you were reading for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. That if when you looked at the books on your shelf, you had read many of them, like what experiences that would lend you, what kinds of thinking that would have given you. Studies show that when we really like visualize and allow ourselves to sit and associate positive outcomes with a habit we're trying to build, they're much more likely to happen. We're now going to grab every single book that we own and put them all on the floor. So books aren't exactly on the floor. I decided to use a table because it was too difficult to get all of my books on the floor in a comfy spot, and my table could only hold so many. So I'm just going through like 100 or so books right now. As soon as we start reading a book, we really learn quite quickly that we haven't done anything at all with this book yet. As you go through all this, you're gonna finish at some point, right? This is the time where it's selecting a book time. If you already picked one out while you were looking at these, that's what happened to me. Moby Dick, I found myself on page 4 and I was like, okay, yeah, I guess this is the book that I'm going to be reading. the book didn't appear to you when you're like reading the first pages, or maybe you've already read all the books you have, or like maybe you're about to get on a plane and you don't have your books with you. That's totally fine. I really just encourage you to read a book that first has like no obvious use like whatsoever to your job or academic pursuit. You like the cover? Do you want to be someone who like reads Foucault? And if you're in doubt, just read the first book that you picked up. And if you forget which book that was, read the last. You're learning to trust in yourself, and you're learning to trust that like it's okay to like deliberately take on this task and to decide for you what's important and not to listen to anyone else. When you have habits, you can decide which book you're going to read before you're actually going to sit down and read it. And then later on, when it's time to read a book, you've already done that. Like there's no postponing it. There's no second guessing it. You've spent that willpower when it was easy to spend it. It's not disrespectful to mark books. The book belongs to you. And I think you should write your name and date on the front cover. That's what I'm doing here. This really sets your intention to read the book. It makes it easier to write notes later on, and in like 30 years when someone else picks it up, maybe they're going to do the same. There's also your chance to write like a very basic intention. It can be anything you want, and I'm going to write it on a slip of paper, which is going to be my bookmark. As you read, this intention is going to be like a partial lens that you can use to extract more from the book and to like really solidify and make it obvious that you're doing your own reading of this, that like you're customizing your reading. In my video on note-taking, I'm going to explain how to use this intention for how to highlight and connect ideas. Lastly, I'm not going to leave you with all of your books on the floor. We can categorize them. I really could talk for hours about like home library taxonomies. I'm going to encourage you to use like color, last name, subject matter, really whatever appeals to you, as long as it's like some coherent system that you understand. Now that you have a book, an intention, and a habit being sketched out, we can really get into how to customize the reading experience itself and explore some of the issues that come up most frequently. The first one we're going to talk about is like the order and how you should read things, or the way of reading you should approach. There's no wrong way or like wrong order to read. You probably don't want to be like me and like try to start reading Dante only to realize like you actually have to read La Vita Nova, and then like you actually can't read La Vita Nova because you haven't read like these other 6 Greek books. But then there's like a translation that's like coming out this year that you want to read so that you can read them all in the same translation. So you have to wait like another 6 months for that. It's a really bad process. I enjoy it to an extent, and you may enjoy it too, and it's okay to do. I'm not telling you how or how not to read. But if you find yourself doing this a lot and not actually reading the books, maybe just try like picking up Dante and reading and allowing yourself to like read them in a new order or in whatever order you can actually accomplish. I'm not saying it's wrong to be ambitious. And I also want to challenge you to like read in new ways. One of the ways that I've been reading lately is by reading every 10th page of a book. So like me, you've already read page 1 on every single book, right? So on this book, you'll start on page 10. Maybe not the first book you're going to read, but like after you get the habit down, you can start a book on page 10 and then page 20, and you're going to read every 10th page until you finish, and then you're going to start over. Kids have this magical ability to like read absolutely everything in front of them. They don't accumulate bookshelves full of Dante that they haven't read yet because they're worried about the wrong order. They like embrace the fun. They embrace like the singular adventure of it. They'll read one day a book about dinosaurs and the next day a book about like Shackleton. Like kids will go all over the place with their reading. And like, I think there's something in that can help us when we try to reapproach reading. That reading should be fun. That reading should be an adventure. That reading should be something that we don't like think that we're going to do the wrong way. And if you like find yourself researching Dante more than actually reading Dante, let that be a cue for a new habit. Let the routine be the researching. And what you're going to do is try to keep the cue and the reward the same. So find what the cue is for when you start this like process of researching. And then you're going to slot in that habit of reading again. Like anytime you see yourself researching, if you're not already like existing within a robust habit of reading, that is the cue to just pick up a book and just start with it. Just read it. Lastly, let someone know that you're reading the book. If you don't have anyone that you can tell, you can just leave a comment and I'll respond, and I can be that like person for you. The social commitment works. And I think you're going to find that reaching out to someone isn't just going to let you build your habit. It may also help pass on the habit of reading to another person. Any single book that you come across could change your life forever. You don't know which one it's going to be. It's like Picasso paintings. Is it painting number 20,436 that's going to be the masterpiece that everyone remembers you for? Which book is going to be the book that completely flips up your life in the best possible way? You don't know. You just have to read them all. You just have to keep reading and reading and reading and hunting for it and trying to find it. That's what's missing. What's missing is like not kick in the ass, but I think this video needs like a little bit of a kick in the ass, and it's like I don't feel comfortable being the kick in the ass person with myself on a camera, there's a lack of confidence there. And I think I have to like own the lack of confidence. It's like, do you take like 15 takes until like you nail it and over massage the thing, or you just like, I don't know how to express this yet, but you have to, and you just need to be open to that book, because it will find you. And when it finds you, it will punch you in the gut and you will think you're living in a Milan Kundera novel for 15 years. End of video.